The Simpsons Hit and Run is a game all about driving. There are a ton of cars to collect, races to win, and children to run over. So the idea of beating this game without ever touching a steering wheel sounds impossible and stupid. But I'm Stoopy, and I play games wrong all the time, although I don't think I've ever attempted a playthrough more wrong than this one. Regardless, I'm still going to try and see if the Simpsons Hit and Run can be beaten without ever driving a single vehicle. The game starts us off playing as Homer with an easy introductory level of heading to the Quickie Mart for some ice cream and Buzz Cola, but we're instantly hit with our first dilemma. The first step of this mission actually requires us to get into our vehicle, but thankfully we aren't forced to drive it, so we can hop straight back out and run over to the shop instead. No time limit, no racing, just a simple run there and back. Well, actually on the way back I hopped onto an NPC's car and he very kindly carried me back home. Which brings me to the rules of this challenge. If I, the player, am in control of any vehicle at any point, the challenge is over. I'm not in control of this car I'm on, therefore riding on top of it is perfectly acceptable. I'll be playing all 7 levels and the 7 main story missions in each one that you are required to beat in order to reach the credits. I won't be attempting any extra side quests or missions that aren't required for me to beat the game. If I manage to reach the credits without driving any vehicles, then nice, I did it. Arriving back home marks the true beginning of the game and our first real mission, a race to give Lisa her art project at school between me and Principal Skinner. But of course, Skinner is in a car and I'm not. Now, you might not know this, but Homer is not exactly known for being a speed demon. So this was already looking pretty hopeless. But even still, I did have some ideas I wanted to try. First off, I tried riding an NPC's car like I had just done, which might have had some potential if they were even slightly aware they were in a race and didn't stop for every single stop sign. So instead, I tried to see if there was even a small glimmer of hope that Homer could somehow win this race just by running the whole way. There was not. But he did actually get further than I expected, and this spurred me to keep on trying, so I looked to using the map's shortcuts to give me as much of a lead as possible. I found that behind my house there's a route I can take which gets me to the Quickie Mart faster than Skinner does. Now this was in no way a big enough lead to win the race, but it did pop a new idea into my head. And then can we get on his car? Maybe. Okay, maybe that's the play. Maybe we take that shortcut and jump on his car. So on my next attempt, I ran back around the garden and clocked Skinner's approach as he came around the corner. I wasn't sure if this was going to work, but as the traffic slowed him down, I jumped up and landed directly on the roof of his car. Now, as he raced towards the finish line, I was right there with him the whole way, but I still didn't know how to finish the race. The first few tries, I was attempting to jump off near the end, hoping that the car would knock me or I would get flung towards the finish line, but the kinds of physics I was hoping for just weren't in the game. So I tried again, this time making sure to stay at the very front of the car, and this was looking good. The game recognized I was in first place the entire way, but even though it clearly said first place when we reached the finish line, I was still failing the mission. If that wouldn't work, then there was only really one way of winning this race. What we really needed now was just a little bit of luck, and after a couple more attempts, the tides eventually turned in our favor. Wait. He got stuck. He got stuck between the cars. Yes, we won the race. Thanks to a very fortunate car crash, we actually managed to beat Skinner and complete our very first mission. So if you didn't believe in this challenge before, maybe now you might start. The next mission was pretty straightforward. We had to find and return items we took from Flanders within the designated time limit. Thanks to this being the first level, the time limit they gave was extremely generous and we were able to find all of Flanders' items with plenty of time to spare just by running around as normal. At this point, I was feeling great. 2 out of 2 missions down and I was beginning to think there was nothing I wouldn't be able to do. But then came along mission 3. When I read what we had to do for mission 3, I was instantly scared. I had to purchase and use the Plow King to blow up Smithers' car. Despite any doubts I had, I still bought the Plow King and started to think about ways I could damage Smithers' car without being in one myself. And honestly, I just couldn't think of anything. But as it turns out, no idea I ever thought of would have ever come to fruition. Because the instant I stepped out of my car, I was shown something much worse. A 10-second timer instructing me to get back into my vehicle. This was it, the end of the line. There is no possible way of beating this mission without driving because the game simply does not allow me to be out of my vehicle. So is that it? Is the game over? Well, not necessarily. Which brings me to any percent speedruns and this game's overly generous difficulty system. Simpsons Hit and Run is a very forgiving game. If you suck ass and fail a mission 7 times, the game deems you incompetent and gives you the option to skip the mission in its entirety and move on to the next. This feature alone is what makes this challenge possible. and it's the only reason I thought to attempt it in the first place. At least, that is what I thought at the time. It turns out that later on in the game, there are some missions that we can't skip no matter how many times we fail, which I'll admit was unexpected, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, as I head over to the power plant for my next mission, I'll quickly mention that it would be extremely boring if I just skipped every mission in the game, so I'm only going to use it for situations like that where it is absolutely necessary. For every other mission, I'm going to do everything I can to complete them without driving and without needing to skip. With that cleared up, we've now arrived at Homer's place of work for mission 4. This is one of the easiest missions in the game because it's one you're not supposed to use a car for in the first place, so we can run around and destroy these little robot things the same as if we were doing a normal playthrough. I then hitched a ride back home for mission 5, which is once again a new mission format that we haven't seen yet. Homer's growing suspicion of the black camera vans around Springfield pushes him to try and follow one back to where it came from. The only issue is, Homer's polygonal feet are not fast enough to keep up with it, and if you don't stay within a certain distance of the van, then the mission fails. It didn't take me long to realize that the best way for me to keep up with the van would be to become the van. That's right, the solution was once again to just jump onto the vehicle. This van was a bit more reckless than the rest of them though. For certain obstacles like ramps, oh no, bad driving, and murdering innocent civilians. He works here now, I guess. And we're running him over. Oh no. I had to sort of shuffle around the van to make sure I didn't get knocked off. It took a few tries, but eventually we managed to ride all the way and find that Mr. Burns is the one seemingly behind all of the weird going-ons in Springfield. Which takes us to mission 6, where we are once again smacked with the dreaded 10-second countdown. Another mission we are forced to skip in order to make way for the final challenge of level 1. The final mission is the longest race so far, going around the entire map. Now, there is the potential to use our current strategy of riding Smithers' car the entire way, but there was one idea I felt I had to try before doing anything else, which brings me to why I'm beating up Carl in the power plant car park. One of the most famous speedrunning tricks in this game is called Carl Skip. In a normal playthrough, when you start this race, the game blocks off the path behind you. This forces the player to take the long way around the map towards the finish line. But with Carl Skip, you can push Carl past this blockade before the race starts, opening up a new, much shorter route to the finish line. And what I want to find out is if Homer can run this faster than Smithers can drive this. After one failed attempt, I pushed Carl into a more optimal position. With the race now set up, it was time to find out if Homer was indeed fast enough to win this race on foot. We're in first. I don't know what position we're in. The game's confused. We're first. The finish line is just over there. I can see him on the map, but I don't think he's close. I think we've got it. I think we've got it. Yeah, so we did it. He won by a landslide, and that marked the completion of the first level. But as happy as I was about this win, I knew this game was only going to get harder and harder. Level 2 kicks us off with a brand new mission format that we haven't seen before. We're playing as Bart, who has skipped school today to get his hands on the new Bone Storm game, so our first mission is to simply run to the Shrine Save to pick it up. We get a somewhat decent time to do this in, so I started just running towards the goal, but on my way, we encounter Principal Skinner, who is trying to hunt down the students who skipped school today, so our new objective is now to get as far away from Skinner as possible. After juggling around with him for a bit, I realised he was always going to be faster than me no matter what, and my best bet was to just run and hope he gets stuck somewhere along the way. And that is when I noticed the glowing neon sign of Moe's Bar. It turns out that entering a building counts as being far away from the vehicle. We wouldn't have any time to stop for a drink though, as the game instantly swapped back to the original objective. I had just under 2 minutes to get there and I had no knowledge of how far it was. So I just ran hoping for the best, used a taxi for a bit of extra speed and arrived with plenty of time to spare. And after doing all of that, a quick conversation with Jimbo Jones completes mission 1 for us. Mission 2 was right around the corner, so before I started, I collected some coins because there are always missions in this game that require some kind of purchase, so it's better to keep collecting them as I go. This mission was a time trial, which had us race around to different locations to collect fireworks. The time limits, however, are a lot shorter than they were back in level 1, giving us only a minute to get back to Moe's. I tried to get as far as I could, as fast as I could, but unfortunately, there just wasn't enough time to get to Moe's without driving. I didn't give up there though. I kept trying, and eventually I realized that I was overlooking a key detail to this mission. The very first step is actually not to get to Moe's, it's to get into our vehicle, and for it there is no time limit. So I just ran all the way to Moe's, used this phone booth right outside to call my vehicle, and the moment I hopped inside, the task was complete. This was the same for every location in this mission. I would just run to the nearest phone booth, call my vehicle, and arrive where I needed to be with no concern for the time limit at all. Even Chief Wiggum, who is supposed to chase us down for the final part of this mission, won't chase me unless I'm in my vehicle. So I just ran as far away as I could, called my vehicle, and the moment I was in, I had successfully escaped the police chase. So this actually ended up being one of the easiest missions in the entire game. The concept of easy missions though would quickly come to an end, as we encounter our first impossible mission of the level. It's a race with the comic book guy against a nerd that we are not allowed out of our vehicle for, giving us no choice but to skip to the next mission, which ended up being my favourite mission in the entire game. The first part requires us to follow a pizza van to Herman's Military Antiques so that we can pick up an old radio for Professor Frink. This would have been difficult, but the van actually spawns far enough away that we have enough time to run in front and jump onto it. But it's a little tricky due to the speed the van is going. But once we were on, we managed to ride it all the way to the antique store, only to find out that the radio had been stolen by Snake. This takes us to the second and much more difficult part of this mission. We find Snake a bit further up the road in the process of being run over and challenge him to a race for the radio he stole. But there's just one problem with the format of the mission. The only way to start this race is by talking to Snake, and once the conversation is over, we both spawn side by side in our respective vehicles. The only way I've found so far to win races is by riding my opponent's car, but by the time I get out of my own, Snake is already long gone, and to make things even more difficult, every time that I lose this race, I'm sent all the way back to the start of the mission and have to do the pizza delivery ride all over again. Honestly, this was a mission I heavily considered skipping, but unlike the other times I've skipped, there are no built-in limitations stopping me from running this race on foot, so I kept trying. I looked for shortcuts, I tried to destroy his car, I searched for anything that would give me some kind of advantage in this race. That's when I remembered who got me through my last race. I once again turned to the speedrunning community. If anyone knows the fastest route to run this race, it's them. So I looked up the world record, and to no one's surprise, they don't just drive the race like normal. They actually go backwards at the start around this giant bend so they can fly off this ramp down to the road below. Now this wouldn't work for us because we're just a human boy, but there are things human boys can do that cars can't. I don't need the ramp to get down to the road below. I can just jump over the wall. So here's the plan. When the race starts, I'm going to jump onto a car to get me to the top of this road as fast as possible. Then while Snake is going around the giant bend to get to the road below, if the timing is right, I should be able to jump down and get there just as he is coming back around the corner. If I'm there in time, I'll have just a couple of seconds to line myself up properly so that I can jump onto his car as he passes. And somehow, if all of that goes according to plan, we should be free to ride on his bonnet all the way to the finish line. And since I'm technically in front of him, I'll finish the race in first place and wait, that actually worked. After all that time, we somehow found a way to beat this impossible race without ever driving a car of our own, and we can now claim the radio for ourselves. As incredible as this victory felt, it wouldn't be celebrated for long, as unfortunately Mission 5 is another impossible mission that we have to skip, so we're moving straight on to Mission 6, which is actually the same premise as Mission 5, except this time we are allowed out of our vehicle. Our goal is to collect the 30 loose monkeys in just 4 minutes. Sounds like a lot, but they're actually really close together, and we were able to collect 29 of the monkeys with quite a bit of time to spare. But imagine my disappointment when I saw that the last monkey was hiding all the way up there. As far as I was concerned, the only way up was to jump off this ramp in a car. So now imagine my excitement the next time I tried it and found an elevator that takes me exactly to where I need to be, and discovered that we can indeed collect all 30 monkeys and complete this mission. But now go straight back to imagining disappointment, because Mission 7 is one we have to skip. This one hurt a little bit though, because it's the first time I've skipped where the game is okay with me being out of my vehicle. And because there was nothing stopping me, I spent way too much time trying to figure out if there was any way to complete this mission. I followed the car up the tunnel and found out that it starts to drive in a loop after a certain point, which at least gave me something to work with. Because I knew the car would keep coming around this road, I created a build-up of traffic here and hoped that when the car crashed into the other cars, it might damage it a little. But this didn't seem to do anything, and even if it did, the time limit I had was too small to destroy the car fully. I kept trying and found out that if I'm in the vehicle the cell car crashes into, then that does do a bit of damage. But regardless, there still just wasn't enough time to pull this off. And then again, even if there were still 2 other cars I had to destroy after this one. I wasn't happy about it, but I had to accept that the only way I would get past this final mission and move on to level 3 was unfortunately to skip it entirely. I sat on this bench and waited to be transported to the next level. The third level, as gorgeous as it is where the game starts to take a noticeable turn for the worst. I've honestly had a blast in the first 2 levels re-exploring a game I used to love in an extremely challenging yet highly rewarding way. As the game gets harder though, the rules are becoming stricter, and that is apparent in level 3 more than ever, because in order to get to level 4, I had to skip 6 of the 7 missions. Missions 1, 3, 4 and 5 all instructed me to stay in my vehicle, making them all automatic skips. But instead of focusing on the gloom, let me instead tell you about mission 2, the only mission we were able to properly complete. It's a mission that takes us all over this area of Springfield by meeting Milhouse in various locations, as he seemingly has information on where Lisa's missing brother Bart is at. And it's thanks to Bart's level that we know exactly how we can complete this mission. We have a certain time limit to reach each location, but once again, that time limit doesn't begin until we are in our vehicle. So essentially, this mission was a glorified tour of the levels map, and it is my favourite one in the game, so this mission was actually just a nice little treat. Although it did hurt a bit running past the giant ramp, knowing I wouldn't be able to fly off it at any point in this playthrough. As I mentioned, missions 3, 4 and 5 were all skipped, so I'll move straight on to mission 6, which gave me a small bit of hope when it let me out of my vehicle. But once I saw how many fish there were to find and the distance between each one, I knew there was 0 chance of us ever collecting them all, so I had to give up pretty quickly on this one. The furthest I could manage was just 9 fish, and just in case you think I didn't try hard enough, even if I got all the way to the end somehow, the last fish spawns over the middle of this bridge, which in itself is impossible to reach without a car, cementing the impossibility of this mission. Which I was very disappointed to find was also the case with the final mission of the level. Once again, I'm allowed out of the vehicle, but we are tasked with destroying a limo, which as we know just isn't something we can do without a vehicle of our own. I tried for so long on this one as well, and I had what I thought was some pretty good ideas. On one attempt, I jumped onto the limo, and while trying to break it with my feet, I noticed my hit and run meter was starting to fill up. So I kept going, and my hope was that the police might rough the car up for me a bit. But I definitely overestimated the capability of Springfield's police force. On one attempt though, it does appear that the police car exploding did damage the limo slightly. The chances of this happening multiple times though were near 0, and the other issue was when the police did manage to crash into us, all they did was bust me and despawn. So I busted the entire idea and moved on to literally my only other option. That was to get the biggest vehicle I own, put it somewhat in the limo's path, sit in it and wait for it to hit us. Yeah, there was just no chance of anything working, so it was time to say goodbye to this level and hope the next would go a bit more in our favour. But that just wasn't the case. The issue I was having was as the game progresses, the missions were getting a lot longer. For example, mission 1 in level 4 tasks us with following the police to Lard Lad's donut shop. I've done missions like this in the past, so I know what to do. If I run straight out my front door, I can hop onto the police car and ride it all the way there. In the easier levels, this would pretty much be mission complete, but now each mission has multiple parts and multiple different challenges to face. So even though we can manage the first part, we then have the task of hitting the donut truck 10 times and collecting each donut it drops. And we know by now that we can't complete any missions that require us to register hits onto a vehicle, so after about 30 minutes of failed attempts, I had to face the fact that the entire mission needed to be skipped. Mission 2 is somewhat similar, where we have to follow Cletus's truck and collect dropped items, but I didn't write this one off straight away. because this time we don't have to hit the vehicle to collect the items. There are, however, two other implications that make this mission impossible. Number one is that I can't miss a single item. If I don't pick up a dropped item within a certain time, the challenge fails. And number two is that I'm a middle-aged woman running around like a Minecraft zombie and can't keep up with Cletus's truck. I instantly decided that my best bet at beating this mission would be to ride on his truck and collect the items as they drop. But that was easier said than done. When this mission starts, we get transported back into our vehicle. This makes it so that there isn't enough time to jump onto his truck before he drives away. So I had to use another trick that I've picked up along the way. For certain missions, you've seen me attempt to build up traffic in the roads to cause vehicles to crash or slow them down. But since most missions are being skipped now, I may as well explain how it's done. Whenever I enter any vehicle, it becomes recognized by the game as mine, meaning it freezes in place and won't move without my control. This effect lasts even if I exit the vehicle. But more importantly, if I were to get into another vehicle, both are now claimed as my own and will stay wherever I leave them. And I can stack this with as many vehicles as I want. I can use this to essentially paint a picture of traffic right in front of where Cletus pulls out. And with a little bit of luck, it will stall him for just enough time for me to be able to jump on. As proud of this maneuver as I was, it wasn't quite enough to be able to complete the mission. I had hoped that the dropped items would spawn directly on top of us, but unfortunately they can spawn anywhere around the vehicle, and I just whiz on by as the mission fails. So after all that, I'm skipping and moving on to mission 3, which is quite a long walk away, right on the other side of the map. And once we get there, we're told we need to purchase Marge's inmate clothes before we can continue. So I spent even more time collecting all the coins I needed, purchased the outfit, and then when we finally got to attempt the mission, it had to be skipped. But thankfully, the next mission was a race, and I've been known to beat these in the past, and this time would be no different. This was a surprisingly easy mission compared to the others we've been faced with. The only real obstacle I faced was this glass pane, but on the next attempt we were able to go straight through it, and I carried on all the way to the end and won the race. It was always a really nice feeling when I was actually able to complete a mission rather than skip it, but mission 5 was another item collecting mission, and that had to be skipped. If we sneak into Bart's room for mission 6 though, we'll be pleasantly surprised to find a mission that never required a car in the first place. Instead, we get to impersonate a police officer and run around collecting Buzz Cola cans to stop it from brainwashing the Springfield citizens. And while doing this, we actually got to appreciate this game's incredible soundtrack. If you didn't know, for every mission, the soundtrack only activates if you're in a vehicle. So most of this challenge has just been spent in really awkward silence, so it was nice to hear some music for a change. And now for the final mission of level 4, we have to destroy this very large vehicle. There is absolutely no chance we'll be able to do this, so it will be another skip mission. However, on one run it did crash into a wall whilst I was riding it and did a bit of damage. So I'll take it as a win that I was able to at least do something to it. Apu's level is up next, and at this point there's still 2 more levels to come after it. And the thing is, up until this point, I haven't driven once. I'm still completing the challenge when I skip a mission, so why does it feel like I'm losing? It started off really well, but now I hardly get to play the game. I did manage to beat mission 2 here, and it was actually really difficult. I had to get away from 2 mafia cars who were chasing me, all while running to get to the hospital on time. So I get some sense of accomplishment for a fleeting moment just to be hit with needing to skip every single other mission in the level. And level 6 was no different. Missions 1 and 2 both inevitably skipped after 2 hours of attempting them. Mission 3 was a following mission, which we were able to ride the whole time and complete it by doing a sick jump over this bridge, but then once again, skip. And I get it, we're playing a game revolved around driving. You're not supposed to not get into a vehicle, and I'm the one that's stupid for trying it. But I just wanted to say quickly, if you're disappointed by how much of the game I've had to skip, just know that I am too. This was supposed to be a way for me to re-experience a game I loved in my own unique way, but as it's turning out, if I want to beat this challenge, I'm having to sacrifice the enjoyment of playing the game. And that's not really what I expected when I went into this challenge. I don't do a ton of research ahead of time, I just take these videos as they come, and they don't always work out how I'd hoped they would. But that's okay. This is the reality of this challenge, and despite the expectations of what I had hoped it could be, it's not my place to try and fake or pretend like it's not. But with all that being said, we've come so far into this journey and I don't plan on quitting at the last hurdle. So without further ado, let's head into the final level of the Simpsons Hit and Run. Level 7 takes place in an alien-invaded Springfield. We start off with a mission from Flanders, who tasks us with getting to Cletus's house in just 40 seconds. A distance far too great to cover within the time limit, so we have to skip. The next mission takes place at the school where the aliens have decided to park their spaceship. Except we can't start it without purchasing the zombie car all the way back at the cemetery. So I made my way over, collecting all the coins I could on the way, purchased the vehicle, and to no one's surprise, we get struck with the big 10-second countdown and have to skip the mission. Now from this point on, all the missions are pretty much the same and are all equally impossible. In order to fight off the aliens, Homer's job for the rest of the game is to deliver barrels of nuclear waste from the power plant all the way across the map to the spaceship. And this isn't Death Stranding, so we unfortunately can't get them there on foot. With the mission skipped, we end up where we're supposed to be back at the school, and now the mission is to just go all the way back to the power plant to pick up more nuclear waste. We've been able to do these missions in the past, but since this is the last level, the game now has a time limit just to get into our car, and once we're inside we then get just 2 minutes to run to the power plant. Even if this was somehow enough time, along the way I also start getting chased by an alien car that I have to try and outrun. So it's safe to say this is another skipped mission, leaving us with just 3 missions left until we reach the credits. And all 3 were exactly the same. We had to drive nuclear waste into the spaceship so we could destroy it for good. Now, to my surprise, I was actually allowed out of my vehicle. Not only that, but I did find a way to move the nuclear waste towards the school. The issue was there was a time limit, and there was no chance in any timeline that I could ever get this to the school in time using this method. So I did my usual restart the mission 7 times, ready to press the skip button, but it never showed up. And a quick Google search later revealed to me that the last 3 missions in this game are all unskippable. It had taken me over 10 hours of trying and failing the same missions over and over to get to this point. And despite my grievances I had with this challenge and having to skip missions, I thought at least by the end of this video I would be able to say that yes, you can beat Simpsons Hit and Run without driving. But that is simply not the case. Surprisingly though, I wasn't upset to hear this news. Apart from the first 2 levels, I haven't really gotten to experience any of this incredible game. I used to love playing this as a child, so for the first time in a very long time, I was finally free to do what I'd always wanted to from the start. Despite the challenges we've overcome and the hours put into this, right at the very last hurdle, we have no choice but to get into a car and drive. But is it actually a loss? In my original rule set, yes, it is impossible to beat the game without driving. But from an in-game standpoint, there has been something I've been contemplating with the entire time. In almost all of the challenges we skipped, including these final 3 missions, the character I am in control of has always been in the passenger seat. This is even acknowledged by characters in-game that we are not the ones driving the vehicle. Yes, I the player have control over it, and in that sense I am driving the car, but me as the character in-game has never once touched the steering wheel. It's something to think about, but honestly I wasn't too bothered about it anymore. It was just fun to finally be able to play this game, and I reached the credits with a failed challenge but also with a feeling that once brought a younger version of myself so much fun.